Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself.
For Lucy had her work cut out for her.
Oh, the doors will have to be taken off their hinges. Rumpelmeyer's men are coming.
And then,
Thought Clarissa Dalloway.
what a morning. Fresh as if issued to children on a beach. What a lark, what a plunge.
She burst open the French windows and plunged into the open air.
How fresh, how calm the air is in the early morning. Like the flap of a wave, the kiss of a wave. Sharp and chill, and yet...
For a girl of 18, as she then was,
Standing there at the open window,
feeling that something awful is about to happen.
looking at the flowers, at the
standing
trees.
and looking until Peter Walsh said,
Musing among the vegetables.
Was that it?
I prefer men to call the flowers.
Was that it?
He must have said it at breakfast one morning.
Peter Walsh.
he would be back from India one of these days, June or July.
I forget which. His letters are awfully dull.
It was his sayings one remembered.
His eyes, oh, his pocket knife, his smile.
His grumpiness.
And when millions of things had utterly vanished,
How strange it was.
one remembered a few sayings of his like this about cabbages.
I prefer men to cabbages.
Thank you.
Hey!
A charming woman,
Touch of the bird about her, light, vivacious.
though she is over 50.
She has grown very white since her illness.
For having lived in Westminster, how many years now? Over 20. One feels, even in the midst of traffic, a particular hush, a suspense.
But that might be her heart, affected, they say, by influenza.
Before Big Ben strikes. There. First a warning, musical. Then the hour, irrevocable. Such fools we are. For heaven only knows why one loves life so, making it up, creating it every moment afresh. The most dejected of people sitting on doorsteps do the same. They love life.
In people's eyes,
In the swing, tramp, and trudge, a bellow in the uproar.
Carriages, motor cars, omnibuses, vans.
Sandwichmen shuffling and swinging.
brass bands,
Barrel organs.
and the triumphant jingle and strange high singing of some aeroplane overhead was what she loved.
Life, London, this moment of June.
The war was over, except for someone like Mrs. Foxcroft.
That nice boy was killed. And now the old manor house must go to a cousin.
Old Lady Bexborough, who was opening a bazaar, they say, with the telegram in her hand.
John was always my favorite. Now he's been killed.
But the war was over. Thank heaven. Over. It was June.
The king and queen were at the palace.
And everywhere, though it was still so early, there was a beating.
A stirring of galloping ponies.
Tapping of cricket bats.
And all the rest of it wrapped in the soft mesh of gray blue morning air.
The whirling young men.
And laughing girls in their transparent muslins who, after dancing all night, are taking their dogs for a run.
Even now, discreet old dowagers are shooting out in their motor cars on errands of mystery.
And shopkeepers are fidgeting in their windows with their lovely old brooches in 18th century settings.
Oh,
But one must economize and not buy things rashly for my Elizabeth.
And she too, loving life as she did with an absurd and faithful passion.
She too is going this very night to kindle and illuminate.
To give my party.
But how strange! On entering the park, the silence,
Mist,
the hum,
the slow-swimming happy ducks.
the pouched birds waddling.
And who should come along but Hugh Whitbread, my old friend Hugh.
Good morning to you, Clarissa. Where are you off to?
The florist. I love walking in London. Really, it's better than walking in the country.
We've just come up. Unfortunately, to see doctors. Some people go to see pictures, go to the opera, take their daughters out, but we come to see doctors.
Is Evelyn ill again?
Evelyn's a good deal out of sorts.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Not the right hat for the early morning, is it?
You look like a girl of 18.
Oh, you will come to my party tonight, won't you?
Oh, of course! Evelyn absolutely insists. We might be a little late, though, after another party at the palace.
Hugh always made her feel a little skimpy.
Schoolgirlish.
But she was attached to him.
It's for having known him always. He was a good sort in his own way.
Though Richard was nearly driven mad by him.
I have never to this day forgiven you for liking Hugh.
I remember scene after scene at Borton, Peter furious. Of course Hugh was not Peter's match in any way, but he was not a positive imbecile as Peter made out.
He's a mere barber's block.
When his old mother asked him to give up shooting or to take her to Bath, he did so without a word. It was really unselfish.
He has no heart, no brain, nothing but the manners and breeding of an English gentleman.
Peter could be impossible, but adorable. To walk with on a morning like this.
June has drawn out every leaf on the trees.
Arlington Street and Piccadilly seemed to chafe the very air in the park and lift its leaves.
Waves of that divine vitality which you love.
For we might be parted for hundreds of years, Peter and I.
You never wrote a letter.
And your letters were dry sticks. But if you were with me now, what would you say? However beautiful the day might be, or the trees and the grass and the little girl in pink, Peter never saw a thing of all that. He would put on his spectacles if I told him to. He would look. But it was the state of the world that interested him.
Wagner, Pope's poetry, people's characters, and the defects of your soul.
How he scolded me, how we argued.
You will marry a prime minister and stand at the top of a staircase, the perfect hostess.
I cried over his words in my bedroom.
You have the makings of the perfect hostess.
So she would still find herself arguing in St. James's Park that she had been right,
And I had, too.
not to marry him.
For in marriage there must be a little independence between people living day in and day out in the same house, which Richard gives me and I him. Where was Richard this morning, for instance? Some committee? I never asked what. But with Peter, everything had to be shared, everything gone into. It was intolerable.
Though for years she had borne about with an arrow sticking in her heart.
And then the horror of the moment when someone told her at a concert that Peter had married the woman he met on the boat going out to India.
India. Never should I forget that.
You're cold, heartless, a prude. You will never understand how much I care for you.
And those Indian women do, presumably, pretty nincompoops.
You're wasting your pity. I'm quite happy, perfectly happy.
Though you've never done a single thing that we've talked of, your whole life has been a failure. Oh! Makes me angry still.
She had reached the park gates.
She looked at the omnibuses in Piccadilly.
She felt very young, and at the same time unspeakably old.
She had a sense, as she watched the taxicabs, of being far out to sea and alone.
I always have the feeling that it is very, very dangerous to live even one day. is this, here, in front of me. Does it matter that I must someday cease completely? All this must go on without me. Somehow in the streets of London, in the ebb and flow of things, here, there, I survive. Peter survives. We live in each other. I am part of the trees, part of the people that I have never met. It spreads ever so far, my life.
She read in a book spread open in a shop window.
Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages.
She had the oddest sense of being herself invisible,
Unseen.
unknown.
There would be no more marrying, no more having children now, but only this astonishing and rather solemn progress with the rest of them up Bond Street. This being Mrs. Dalloway, not even Clarissa anymore, this being Mrs. Richard Dalloway. That is all. That is all.
She paused at the window of a glove shop where before the war you could buy almost perfect gloves.
Uncle William used to say that a lady is known by her shoes and her gloves. He turned in his bed one morning in the middle of the war and said, "I have had enough."
She had a passion for gloves, but her own daughter, her Elizabeth, cared not a straw for them.
Not a straw. Elizabeth really cared for her dogs most of all. Still better the dogs than Miss Kilman. Better distemper and all the rest of it than sitting in a stuffy bedroom with a prayer book. Better anything.
It might be only a phase such as all girls go through. It might be falling in love.
But why would Miss Kilman?
Miss Kilman is very able, has a really historical mind.
Anyhow, Elizabeth and Miss Kilman are inseparable. And Elizabeth, my own daughter, goes to communion. Miss Kilman would do anything for the Russians, would starve herself for the Austrians. But in private, she inflicts positive torture, dressed in a green Mackintosh coat. Year in, year out, she wears that coat. She's never in a room 5 minutes without making you feel her superiority, your inferiority. How poor she is, how rich you are. How she lives in a slum without a rug or a chair or whatever it might be. Poor, embittered, unfortunate creature. Miss Kilman is one of those specters with whom one battles in the night. One of those specters who stands astride us and sucks up half our life's blood.
No doubt, with another throw of the dice, she would have loved Miss Kilman.
But not in this world, no.
She pushed through the swinging doors of the florist. Mrs. Dalloway! We have delphiniums, sweet peas, bunches of lilac, and carnations, masses of carnations, roses, irises.
Ah, yes.
As if it were an evening and girls in muslin frocks came out to pick sweet peas and roses after a summer's day. Those motor cars, I'm so sorry.
The explosion came from a motor car opposite the florist window.
There was a face of the very greatest importance against the dove-gray upholstery.
Was it the Prince of Wales?
The Queen?
The Prime Minister?
Whose face was it?
Nobody knew.
Septimus Warren Smith found himself unable to pass.
Septimus Warren Smith had a look of apprehension that made complete strangers apprehensive too.
The world has raised its whip. Where will it descend?
Everything came to a standstill.
Throb of the engine sounds like a pulse drumming through the body.
The sun became extraordinarily hot.
Everyone looked at the motor car.
Septimus looked.
Traffic accumulated.
And there the motor car stood.
The world threatens to burst into flames. It is I who am blocking the way. Am I not being looked at and pointed at? Am I not rooted to the pavement for a purpose? And for what purpose?
Septimus! Let us go on, andiamo.
All right.
People will notice, people will see.
I will kill myself.
It's a horrible thing to say. Suppose somebody hears you. Now we will cross the street, huh?
The motor car, with its blinds drawn, proceeded towards Piccadilly.
Was it the Queen? The Prince? The Prime Minister? Nobody knew.
Greatness was passing.
Ordinary people were within speaking distance of the majesty of England.
Of the enduring symbol of the state, which will be known to curious antiquaries, sifting the runes of time.
When London is a grass-grown path, and all those hurrying along the pavement this morning are but bones with a few wedding rings mixed up in their dust.
It's probably the Queen. The Queen going to some hospital. The Queen opening some bazaar.
Clarissa saw the car disappearing to blaze among candelabras that night in Buckingham Palace.
And Clarissa, too, was giving a party.
A small crowd gathers at the gates of Buckingham Palace.
Poor people, all of them! They waited! Rumors thrilled the nerves of their thighs at the thought of royalty looking at them!
The palace!
Flag flying!
The Queen bowing!
Prince saluting! The Queen's old doll's house! Princess Mary married to an Englishman!
And the Prince! Who took wonderfully after old King Edward! But was ever so much slimmer.
The Prince lives at St. James's, but he's come to visit his mother this morning!
Think of the housemates! All of the housemates! The bedrooms! All of the bedrooms!
There it is! Coming up over the trees! White smoke! Oh, it's actually writing something, making letters in the sky!
The aeroplane soars straight up, curves in a loop, sinks, rises, and whatever it does, wherever it goes, out flutters behind it a thick ruffled bar of white smoke which wreathes upon the sky in letters.
A. C. Is that it?
An E? Then an L?
No, I think that's a K!
An E.
A Y, perhaps.
Glaxo!
Cremo!
All down the mall, people are looking up into the sky. As they look, the whole world becomes perfectly silent.
It's toffee.
Cynthia Warren Smith, sitting by her husband's side in Regent's Park, looked up.
Look, look, Septimus.
For Dr. Holmes had told her.
Make your husband take an interest in things outside of himself. Make him see real things. There is nothing whatever the matter. He's just a little out of sorts.
So, they are signaling to me. Well, not in actual words. That is, I can't read the language yet, but it is plain enough, this beauty, this exquisite beauty. They're here to provide me with beauty, more beauty.
It's toffee! They're advertising toffee! T-O-F! K-R?
K-or? She sounds like a grasshopper. Marvelous discovery. That the human voice in certain atmospheric conditions can quicken trees into life. The elm trees are rising and falling like plumes on horses' heads. They will make me mad. Leaves are alive. Trees are alive. And the leaves are connected with my own body by millions of fibers. The sparrows are part of the pattern. The child cries. Far away a horn sounds. All taken together, they mean the birth of a new religion.
Septimus, people will notice. I'm going to walk to the fountain and back. Dr. Holmes may say there is nothing the matter with him, but I cannot sit beside him when he stares so. He can't even see me, and it makes everything terrible. The sky, the trees, the children playing, all terrible. And I can tell no one. To my own mother I can only say, Septimus, he works too hard. The love makes one solitary. Look at him, there, sitting, staring. He fought in the war. He was brave, but he is not Septimus now. Dr. Holmes said there was nothing the matter. It is I who suffers. But I have no one to tell.
Italy and the white houses and the room where her sister sat making hats were far away.
There, the streets are crowded every night with people walking, laughing out loud.
Not half alive like people here looking at a few ugly flowers stuck in pots. Oh, you should see the Milan gardens.
But to whom was she talking?
There was nobody to listen.
I am alone. I am his wife, and I would never, never tell anyone that he is mad, but he threatens to kill himself, to throw himself under a cart.
Men must not cut down trees. There is a God. Change the world. No one kills from hatred. Make it known.
A sparrow perched on the railing opposite and chirped, Septimus, 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 Septimus.
It sang in Greek words how there is no crime.
And now it sang of a life beyond a river where the dead walk.
There is no death. Here is my hand. There the dead.
White things were assembling behind the railing.
Evans is behind the railing.
Shh, what are you saying?
Interrupted again. Away from people. We must get away from people. Over there.
Look, Septimus, a little troop of boys with carrying cricket stumps. A little one looks like a clown in a music hall. Look, Septimus, look.
The voice which now speaks to me is the greatest of mankind. I, who have been taken from life to death and spoken to by the Lord who has come to renew society. I do not want it.
Look, darling, you must not talk aloud to yourself. Look!
But what was there to look at?
Nothing at all.
The hall of the house was cool as a vault.
Mrs. Dalloway felt like a nun who had left the familiar world and her veils round her.
The cook whistles in the kitchen.
This was her life.
Moments like this are like buds on the tree of life.
Mr. Dalloway, ma'am.
Lady Bruton wishes to know if Mr. Dalloway will lunch with her today.
Mr. Dalloway, ma'am, told me to tell you he would be lunching out.
Oh dear.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Fear no more the heat of the sun. Lady Bruton, whose lunch parties are said to be extraordinarily amusing, has not asked me. No vulgar jealousy can separate me from Richard.
But she feared time itself, how year by year her share was sliced.
She felt suddenly shriveled, old.
Narrower and narrower would her bed be.
For Richard insisted after her illness that they must sleep undisturbed in an attic room.
I have failed him.
She could see what she lacked.
It is not beauty, it is not mind, it is something central which permeates, some warmth which breaks the cold contact of man and woman.
Yet she could not resist sometimes yielding to the charms of a woman.
She did then feel what men felt.
Only for a moment, but it was enough.
It was a revelation. A tinge like a blush which one tried to check. And then as it spread, one yielded to its expansion and rushed to the farthest verge and there quivered and felt the world come closer, swollen with some astonishing significance, some pressure of rapture which split its thin skin and gushed and poured with extraordinary alleviation over the cracks and sores. It was over. The moment. But this question of love, this falling in love with women. Take Sally's seat. Hadn't that been love? She sat on the floor with her arms around her knees, smoking a cigarette. Where could that have been? At some party? I said to some man, "Who is that?" All that evening, I couldn't take my eyes off Sally. She was an extraordinary beauty, dark, large-eyed, with a sort of abandonment, as if she could say anything, do anything. Sally always said that she had French blood in her veins. An ancestor had been with Marie Antoinette, had his head cut off, left a ruby ring. That summer, she came to stay at Borden. Walked in without a penny in her pocket. There'd been some quarrel at home. She'd rushed off in a passion. We sat up till all hours of the night talking. Sally made me feel for the first time how sheltered my life at Borden was. I knew nothing about sex, nothing about social problems. There we sat, hour after hour, talking in my bedroom at the top of the stairs, talking about life, how we were going to reform the world. The ideas were Sally's, of course, but soon I was just as excited. We read Plato in bed before breakfast, read Shelley by the hour. Sally's power was amazing. It was her way with flowers, for instance. At Borton, we always had these stiff little vases that went all the way down the table. When Sally went out, picked hollyhocks, dahlias, all sorts of flowers. She cut off their heads and made them swim on the top of water in bowls. The effect was extraordinary coming into dinner. Of course, Aunt Helena thought it was wicked to treat flowers like that. Oh. And then there was the time that she forgot her sponge for her bath, and she ran along the passageway naked. The old housemaid went about grumbling, suppose any of the gentlemen had seen. Indeed, she did shock people. She was untidy, Papa said. But the strange thing was the purity of my feeling for Sally. It was not like one's feelings for a man. It sprang from a sense of being in league together. A presentiment that something was bound to part us. We spoke of marriage always as a catastrophe. I remember standing at the top of my bedroom, saying aloud, "She is beneath this roof. She is beneath this roof." I remember going cold with excitement, all because I was coming down to dinner to meet Sally Seton.
What a shame to sit indoors.
We all went out onto the terrace and walked up and down. Peter Walsh and Joseph Breitkopf went on about Wagner. And then came the most exquisite moment of my whole life. My whole world turned upside down. I felt as if I'd been given a present, wrapped up, and told just to keep it, not to look at it. A diamond, something infinitely precious.
Musing among the vegetables.
It was like running one's face against a granite wall in the darkness. It was horrible.
Tell me the names of the stars.
Well, there's Polaris, that's the North Star, and then Jupiter, and Aldebaran, and Cassiopeia.
I could feel Peter's hostility, his jealousy, his determination to break into our companionship.
Oh, and those are the Pleiades, that little cluster over there. Sometimes they're called the Seven Sisters.
I wonder what he would say when he came back.
That she had grown older. It was true.
Since her illness, she had turned almost white.
I am not old yet.
The moment of this June morning, as she looked into the glass, seeing the delicate pink face of the woman who was that very night to give a party.
Of Clarissa Dalloway.
Of myself. Now, where is my dress?
She had torn it. She would mend it.
I will take my scissors, my thread, my... What is it? Ah, my thimble, of course. Down into the drawing room, for I must see that everything is in order. Oh, Lucy, the silver does look nice.
Can I help to mend that dress, ma'am?
You have enough on your hands already, but thank you, Lucy.
So, on a summer's day, waves collect and fall, and the whole world seems to be saying that is all.
Fear no more. Goodness, the doorbell.
Mrs. Dalloway will see me. Oh, yes. She will see me. After 5 years in India, Clarissa will see me.
Peter!
Clarissa. And how are you?
She's grown older.
Exactly the same. A little thinner, drier perhaps, but he looks awfully well and just the same.
How heavenly it is to see you again.
Oh, that's so like him.
I only reached town last night. How is everything? How is everybody? Richard, Elizabeth, and what's all this?
Here she's been sitting all the time you've been in India, mending her dress, going to parties with her husband, the admirable Richard.
Richard is quite well. He's had some committee. Do you mind if I finish the sewing on my dress? We have a party tonight, which I shan't invite you to, my dear Peter.
It is delicious to hear her say that, my dear Peter.
Why won't you invite me to your party?
Now, of course, he's enchanting. Why did you make up your mind not to marry him that awful summer?
But how extraordinary that you should come this morning. Do you remember how the blinds used to flap at Borton?
They did.
You remember breakfasting alone very awkwardly with her father.
I often wish I'd got on better with your father.
Oh, but he never liked anyone who, I mean, our friends.
She could have bitten her tongue for reminding Peter that he had wanted to marry her.
Of course you wanted to marry her. It almost broke your heart, too. His grief rose like a moon, looked at from a terrace.
She seemed to be sitting with him on the terrace, in the moonlight.
I never go there now.
But why go back like this to the past? Why make him think of it again? Why make him suffer?
Do you remember the lake?
Yes, I remember the lake. Yes.
Stop! Stop! He is not old. His life is not over, not by any means. Will you tell her? Make a clean breast of it all? But she is too cold. Daisy would look ordinary beside Clarissa, and she would think you a failure. You are a failure compared with all this. The inlaid table, the candlesticks, the chair covers. You are a failure.
What an extraordinary habit that was, always playing with a knife, always making one feel frivolous, a mere chatterbox.
Well, and what's happened to you?
Millions of things. I am in love. In love. In love with a girl in India.
In love?
At his age, that he should be sucked under by that monster. He is in love. Not with you, with some younger woman, of course.
And who is she?
A married woman, unfortunately. The wife of a major in the Indian Army. She has 2 small children, a boy and a girl, and I've come over to see my lawyers about the divorce.
Do what you like with it, Clarissa. There it is. No one understands you as Clarissa does. Your exquisite intimacy.
What a waste. What a folly. All his life, Peter has been fooled like that. First, getting sent down from Oxford. Next, marrying the girl he met on the boat, going out to India, and now in love with the wife of a major in the Indian Army. Thank heaven you refused to marry him.
But what are you going to do?
Oh, the lawyers and solicitors are going to do it.
For heaven's sake, leave your knife alone.
It's his silly unconventionality that annoys you, has always annoyed you. And now at his age, how silly.
He knows all that.
I know what I'm up against. You and Dalloway and all the rest. But I'll show you. You still have the power to make the moon rise on the terrace in the summer sky. Tell me, are you happy, Clarissa? Does Richard...
Here's my Elizabeth.
How do you do?
Hello, Elizabeth. Goodbye, Clarissa.
Peter, remember the party? Remember my party tonight?
I've done nothing wrong. I loved Septimus. I was happy. I had a beautiful home. My sisters still live there making hats. Why should I suffer?
You must go back to Septimus. It's time for you to go to the doctor.
Everyone has friends who were killed in the war. Everyone gives up something when they marry.
You gave up your home.
Yet he could be happy when he chose.
When you went to Hampton Court on top of a bus, you were perfectly happy.
All the little red and yellow flowers were out on the grass. Like a floating lamp, he said. And he laughed, making up stories. But then suddenly he said, now we will kill ourselves when we were standing by the river.
And he looked at the river with a look which you had seen in his eyes when a train went by.
A look as if something fascinated him.
He argued with me about killing ourselves. He explained how wicked people were. He said he knew their thoughts. He knew everything. He knew the meaning of the world, he said. Is it my wedding ring? My hand has grown so thin I put it in my purse.
Remember my party. Remember my party. Oh, these parties. Clarissa's parties. Why does she give these parties? Clarissa has grown hard. And a trifle sentimental into the bargain. The way she said, here is my Elizabeth. How annoying. Why not, here's Elizabeth simply? It was insincere, and Elizabeth didn't like it either. I understand young people. I like them. I, Peter Walsh, am for the first time in my life in love. Women don't know what passion is. They don't know the meaning of it to men. Clarissa was always timid, even as a girl. In middle age, that timidity becomes conventionality, and then it's all over. It's all over.
He spoke to himself rhythmically in time with the flow of Big Ben striking the half hour.
The leaden circles dissolved in the air. He wondered whether by calling at that hour he had annoyed her.
He was overcome with shame at having been a fool, weeping, telling her everything.
As usual, as usual.
As a cloud crosses the sun, silence falls on London. Time flaps on the mast. Here we stand, rigid. The skeleton of habit alone upholds the human frame.
Clarissa refused me. Clarissa refused me. No! No, I am not old!
He marched up Whitehall as if there his future rolled down to him.
I am not old, or set, or dried in the least.
As for what they said of him, the Dalloways and theirs said, he cared not a straw.
Not a straw!
Though it was true he would have to see whether Richard could help him to some job.
He had been sent down from Oxford.
True. He had been in some sense a failure.
True. Still, the future of civilization lies in the hands of young men like that. They don't know the troubles of the flesh yet, all that I've been through.
The strangeness of standing alone, unknown at 11:30 in Trafalgar Square, overcame him.
What is it? Where am I? And why, after all, does one do it?
He stood at the opening of endless avenues, down which he might wander if he chose.
I've not felt so young in years.
He had escaped.
He had escaped from being precisely what he was.
I haven't felt so young for years. My, but she's extraordinarily attractive.
Walking across Trafalgar Square came a young woman who seemed to shed veil after veil until she became the very woman he had always had in mind.
Young, but stately. Merry, but discreet. Dark, but enchanting.
You, only you.
Then her long cloak blew out with an enveloping kindness, as of arms that would open and take the tired.
She's young, quite young. There's a dignity about her. She's not worldly like Clarissa, not rich like Clarissa. Is she respectable? Oh, she's witty, with a lizard's flickering tongue.
For one must invent, must allow oneself a little diversion.
To embarrass her was the last thing that he wished.
Come and have an ice.
Oh, yes!
Clarissa's voice sang in his ears, "Remember my party! Remember my party!"
It was over.
Well, I've had my fun. I've had it.
And it was smashed to atoms, his fun.
For it was half made up, as he knew very well.
Made up as one makes up the better part of life.
Where should you go now?
No matter.
Up the street, then, towards Regent's Park.
It's a splendid morning, too, like the pulse of a perfect heart.
A splendid achievement in its own way, after all. London, civilization. As a child, I walked in Regent's Park. Odd how the thought of childhood keeps coming back to me. The result of seeing Clarissa, perhaps, for women live much more in the past than men do. They attach themselves to places and their fathers. A woman's always proud of her father. Bourton was a nice place, a very nice place. But I could never get on with the old man. There was quite a scene one night. An argument about something or other. What, I cannot remember. Politics, presumably. The death of the soul. Lord, Lord, the death of the soul. It was at Borden that summer, early in the 90s, when I was so passionately in love with Clarissa. There were a great many people there. Clarissa and I had quarreled. It was an awful evening, and I couldn't see her, couldn't have it out. There were always people about. She'd go on as if nothing had happened. That was the devilish part of her, a coldness, which I felt again this morning talking to her, an impenetrability. Yet heaven knows I loved her. I had gone in to dinner rather late from some idiotic idea of making myself felt. I just sat there eating. And then, halfway through dinner, I made myself look across at Clarissa for the first time. She was talking to a young man on her right. I had a sudden revelation. She will marry that man. I didn't even know his name. For of course, it was that afternoon, that very afternoon, that Dalloway had come over. And Clarissa called him Wickham. Someone brought him over, and Clarissa got his name wrong. She introduced him to everybody as Wickham. At last he said, "Ah, my name is Dalloway." That was my first view of Richard. Fair young man, rather awkward, blurting out, "Ah, my name is Dalloway." Sally got hold of it. Always after that, she called him, "Ah, my name is Dalloway." There was a sort of, how shall I put it? A sort of ease in Clarissa's manner to him, something maternal, something gentle. All through dinner, I tried to hear what they were saying. Afterwards, I remember Clarissa came to me with her perfect manners, wanted to introduce me to somebody, spoke as if we'd never met before, which enraged me. "The perfect hostess," I said to her, whereupon she winced all over, but I meant her to feel it. I would have done anything to hurt her after seeing her with Dalloway. Never, never had I suffered so infernally. At last I saw people going out of the room. They were going boating on the lake by moonlight, one of Sally's mad ideas. They all went out. I was left quite alone. And then Clarissa came back. she had come back to fetch me. I was overcome by her generosity, her goodness. I had never felt so happy in the whole of my life. Without a word, we made it up. We walked down to the lake. I had 20 minutes of perfect happiness. Her voice, her dress, her spirit. She made us all disembark and explore the island. She laughed, she sang, and I knew all the time Dalloway was falling in love with her, and she was falling in love with Dalloway. But it didn't seem to matter. Nothing mattered. We sat on the ground and talked, Clarissa and I. We went in and out of each other's minds without any effort. And then in a second it was over. Dalloway would marry Clarissa. Still, one gets over things. Still, life has a way of adding day to day.
Our marriage is over. The rope is cut. I am free. As it was decreed that I, Septimus, the Lord of men, should be free. Alone, since my wife has thrown away her wedding ring, I, Septimus, am alone. I am called forth in advance of the mass of men to hear the truth, to learn the meaning which now, at last, after all the toils of civilization, Greeks, Romans, Shakespeare, Darwin, and now myself, was to be given whole to whom?
To the Prime Minister.
The supreme secret must be told to the cabinet first, that trees are alive.
Trees are alive.
Next, there is no crime.
No crime.
Next, love. Universal love.
Love. Universal love.
No crime. Love. The dog is turning into a man! I can't watch it happen. It's horrible, terrible to see a dog become a man. Heaven is divinely merciful, infinitely benign. It spares me, pardons my weakness. But what is the scientific explanation? For one must be scientific above all things. Why can I see through bodies? See into the future where dogs will become men? Scientifically speaking, the flesh is melted off the world. My body is macerated until only the nerve fibers are left. My body is spread like a veil upon a rock. The earth thrills beneath me. Red flowers grow through my flesh. I'm like a drowned sailor on a rock. I have been dead, but now I am alive. Let me rest. Something tremendous is about to happen. The trees are waving. We welcome. The world seems to say we accept.
We accept.
We create.
We create.
Beauty. The world seems to say.
Beauty.
As if to prove it, scientifically. Wherever I look, beauty springs instantly. To watch a leaf quivering in the air is an exquisite joy. Beauty is the truth now. Beauty is everywhere.
It's the time.
For God's sake, don't come! It's Evans. But there's no blood on him. No wounds. I must tell the whole world.
Please, Septimus, please.
I must tell them about this revelation.
The time. Septimus, what is the time?
I will tell you the time.
And that is being young. To be having an awful scene in the middle of the morning. What do young people think about now? These 5 years, 1918 to 1923, have been somehow very important. People look different. On board ship, coming home, there were lots of young men and girls. Betty and Bertie, I remember, carrying on quite openly. Oh, as hard as nails she was, Betty, what's her name? She will marry when it suits her to marry. Marry a rich man and live in a large house near Manchester. Who was it now who had done that? Married a rich man and lived in a large house near Manchester. Sally Seton, of course. It was Sally Seton. The last person in the world one would have expected to marry a rich man and live in a large house near Manchester. The wild, the daring Sally. But of all that ancient lot, Sally was probably the best. She saw through Hugh Whitbread, anyhow.
Hugh Whitbread? He thinks of nothing but his own appearance. He ought to have been a duke. He will certainly marry one of the royal princesses.
I remember an argument one Sunday morning at Borden about women's rights.
You represent all that is detestable in British middle-class life. You are responsible for the state of those poor girls in Piccadilly. He has read nothing, thought nothing, felt nothing. The stable boys have more life in them than Hugh. No country but England could have produced him.
Something happened, I've forgotten what. In the smoking room, he insulted you?
He kissed me.
Oh, incredible. For of all the people I have ever met, Hugh is the greatest snob. And he's found his job at court, looking after the king's cellars.
Polishing the imperial shoe buckles.
He has 5,000 or 10,000 a year, one would think. While I beg for a job, something that can bring in 500. Whitbread could find me the job, presumably. Or Dalloway. I don't mind what I ask Dalloway. Whatever he takes up, he does in the same matter-of-fact way.
Without a touch of imagination.
And Clarissa sucks it all in. Heaven knows if she doesn't think him the most original mind she's ever met. Now, that was one of the bonds between us. I remember a garden where we used to walk.
With rose bushes and giant cauliflowers.
Yes, I remember you tearing off a rose, stopping to exclaim at the beauty of the cabbage leaves in the moonlight. It's extraordinary how vividly it all comes back to me, things I haven't thought of for years. Well, you implored me to carry off Clarissa.
Yes! Save her from the Hughes and the Dalloways and all the other perfect gentlemen that would stifle her soul.
But one must do Clarissa justice. She has the extraordinary gift of making a world of her own wherever she happens to be.
You're still in love with her.
No, I am not in love with her anymore. I'm simply trying to explain her. The compensation of growing old is simply this, that the passions remain strong as ever, but one has gained at last the power of taking hold of experience and turning it round slowly in the light. Life itself, every moment of it, every drop of it, here, now, in the sun, in Regent's Park, is enough. But it was Clarissa one remembered. There she was. There she was.
Your bunch of purple heather, the last red asters of an autumn day, and let us sit in
Septimus was one of the first to volunteer.
He went to France to save England.
There in the trenches, he developed manliness. He was promoted. He drew the attention, indeed the affection, of his officer, Evans.
But when
Evans was killed, just before the armistice in Italy,
Septimus congratulated himself upon feeling very little.
the war taught me it was sublime.
He had been through the whole show. Friendship, European war, death. He was promoted. He was still under 30 and bound to survive.
The last shells missed me.
he watched them explode with indifference.
When peace came, he was in Milan, in the house of an innkeeper and his daughters making hats. And to Lucrezia, the youngest daughter, he became engaged one evening.
When the panic was on him,
That I could not feel.
for now that it was all over, truce signed and dead buried, he had these sudden thunderclaps of fear.
I cannot feel.
There in the house with the Italian girls, he could see them,
Could hear them,
but something failed him.
I cannot feel.
Still, he had a refuge.
Will you marry me?
Yes. Yes, Septimus. It is the hat that matters most. One must examine the cloak and the dress and the way the woman holds herself. Bellissima. Beautiful.
But beauty was behind a pane of glass for Septimus.
I cannot feel. I can reason, I can read, I can add up the bill. My brain is perfect. It might be possible that the world itself is without meaning.
I want to have a son. I want to have a son like you.
One cannot bring children into a world like this. The truth is that human beings have neither kindness, nor faith, nor charity. They hunt in packs. Their packs scour the desert and vanish screaming into the wilderness. They desert the fallen. Men are trapped in mines. Women are burned alive.
Mrs. Vermeer's daughter is expecting a baby. She will not grow old and have no children. I'm very lonely, Septimus.
Far away he heard her sobbing. He heard it accurately, noticed it distinctly. He compared it to a piston thumping.
But I feel nothing.
I'm going to call for a doctor. Dr. Holmes.
There's nothing whatever the matter.
Oh, what a relief. What a good man. What a kind man.
When I feel the way you do, I go to the music hall. I take the day off with my wife and play golf. Why not try 2 tabloids of bromide dissolved in some water before bed? There is nothing whatever the matter.
Except I do not feel. I didn't care when Evans was killed. I married my wife without loving her. I lied to her, seduced her, and am so pocked and marked with vice that women shudder when they see me in the street.
So, you're in a funk. You actually talk of killing yourself to your wife? She's quite a girl. Foreign, isn't she? Doesn't that give her a very odd idea of English husbands? Doesn't one owe a duty to one's wife? Wouldn't it be better to do something rather than lying about? Listen to me. The next time I come, I hope to see you out of bed and not making that charming woman, your wife, anxious over you.
Once you stumble, human nature is on you. Holmes is on you. My only chance is to escape without letting Holmes know.
I don't understand you. Dr. Holmes is such a kind man. He's so interested in you. He only wants to help us.
So, I am deserted. The whole world is clamoring, kill yourself, kill yourself. But how does one set about it? The table knife with floods of blood? by sucking a gas pipe. I'm too weak. Besides, now that I'm quite alone, condemned as those who are about to die are alone, there is a luxury in it, freedom.
I had to buy the roses, Septimus, from the poor man on the street, but they are almost dead already.
The dead are with me. Heavens! Heavens!
What do you say? I must run and get Dr. Holmes. My husband is a man.
You brute. You brute.
Now what is this all about? Talking nonsense to frighten your wife? I'll give you something that'll help you sleep. And if you have no confidence in me, by all means, go see Dr. Bradshaw on Harley Street.
I could see the first moment they came into the room, it was a case of complete physical and nervous breakdown with every symptom in advanced stage. How long has Dr. Holmes been attending him?
6 weeks.
Did he prescribe bromide?
Yes, he said there was nothing the matter.
Ah, yes, those general practitioners. It takes half my time to undo their blunders. You served with great distinction in the war.
The war?
The European War, the little shindy with schoolboys and gunpowder. You served with distinction.
Yes, he served with the greatest distinction. He was promoted.
And I see they have the very highest opinion of you at your office, so that you have nothing to worry you, no financial anxiety, nothing.
I have committed a crime, and I've been condemned to death by human nature.
He has done nothing wrong whatsoever.
If Mr. Smith would wait in the next room, I'd like to speak to Mrs. Smith. Your husband is very seriously ill. Has he threatened to kill himself?
He has, but he didn't mean it.
Of course not. It's merely a question of rest. A long rest in bed. There's a delightful home down in the country where your husband will be perfectly looked after.
Away from me.
Unfortunately, yes. The people we care for most are not good for us when we are ill.
But he is not mad, is he?
I never speak of madness. I would describe it as not having a sense of proportion.
But Septimus doesn't like doctors. You would refuse to go there.
My dear Mrs. Smith, let me explain the state of the case. Your husband has threatened to kill himself. There is no alternative.
No,
it's
but-
a question of law. Your husband will lie in a bed in a beautiful home in the country. The nurses there are admirable. I will visit him once a week. Now, if you have no questions to ask, we will ask your husband back.
I have nothing to ask.
Mr. Smith,
Round sailor,
Mr. Warren Smith, we've had our little talk.
He says you are very, very ill, Septimus.
We have been arranging that you should go into a home.
One of Holmes's homes?
Yes, one of my homes, Mr. Warren Smith, where we will teach you to rest. I am quite certain that when you are well, you are the last man in the world to frighten your wife. But you have talked of killing yourself. We all have our moments of depression.
Once you fall, human nature is on you. Holmes and Bradshaw are on you. They scour the desert, they fly screaming into the wilderness. The rack and the thumbscrew are applied.
Impulses come upon him sometimes.
That's my own affair.
Nobody lives for himself alone, and you have a brilliant career before you.
But if I were to confess, would you let me off then?
Yes?
I
Try to think of yourself as little as possible. I will make all the arrangements, and I will let you know between 5 and 6 this evening. Trust everything to me. Good afternoon. If in this exacting science, which has to do with what, after all, we know nothing about, the nervous system, the human brain, if a doctor loses his sense of proportion, he fails. When a man comes into your room and says he's Christ, a common delusion, and threatens, as they often do, to kill himself, you invoke proportion. You order, rest in bed, rest in solitude, rest without friends, without books, without messages. 6 months, rest. Proportion. Divine proportion.
Hugh Whitbread had been afloat on the cream of English society for 55 years. He had known prime ministers. And if it were true that he had not taken part in any of the great movements of the time or held important office, 1 or 2 humble reforms stood to his credit. An improvement in public shelters was one. The protection of owls in Norfolk another. And his name at the end of letters to the Times always commanded respect.
For I would never lunch with Lady Bruton, for example, whom I've known these 20 years without bringing her a bunch of carnations and asking Miss Brush, Lady Bruton's secretary, after her brother in South Africa.
Which Miss Brush so much resented that she said, "Thank you, he's doing quite well in South Africa," when for half a dozen years he had been doing badly in Portsmouth.
Good afternoon, Lady Bruton.
I prefer Richard Dalloway, of course. He's made of much finer material. But I won't let them run down my poor dear Hugh. I will never forget his kindness. He has been really remarkably kind. Although I've forgotten precisely upon what occasion. Anyhow, the difference between one man and another does not amount to much. I've never seen the sense of cutting people up, as Clarissa Dalloway does, cutting them up and sticking them together again, not at any rate when one is 62. Oh, thank you, Hugh. Oh, now, there's nobody else coming. I'm afraid I've got you here on false pretenses to help me out of a difficulty. But let us eat first. Thank you, Millie.
Would the carnations look charming against your face?
Now, tell me, I can't quite remember, Lady Bruton, you are the General's great-granddaughter.
Great-great-granddaughter. Sir Roderick, Sir Miles, Sir Talbot.
That's it! It's remarkable how in your family the likeness persists. In the women! You could have been a general of dragoons yourself, and I would have served under you cheerfully.
And how is Clarissa?
She's quite well, thank you.
I met Clarissa in the park this morning.
Did you?
Do you know who's in town? Oh, thank you, dear. Our old friend, Peter Walsh.
Peter Walsh.
All 3 of us remembered the same thing.
How
passionate he had been in
love.
Yes, Peter Walsh has come back to our shore.
I'm not certain how we might help him.
Yes, there's some flaw in his character.
Of course, one might mention his name to one of the heads of government offices, but I'm afraid it won't amount to anything, not anything permanent, because of his character.
In trouble with some woman, no doubt.
Yes, I thought as much.
However, we shall hear the whole story from Peter himself. Now then, I must bring us to the subject which has engaged my undivided attention. Emigration! The project for emigrating young people of both sexes, born of respectable parents, and setting them up with a fair prospect of doing well in Canada. Emigration is not to others the obvious remedy, the sublime conception. So I must write. And 1 letter to the Times costs me more than to organize an expedition to South Africa.
After a morning's battle, beginning, tearing up, beginning again, I must turn gratefully to you, Hugh Whitbread, who possesses, no one could doubt it, the art of writing letters to the Times. You have such a command of language. You are able to put things just as editors like them put. You men know how to put things. Know what should be said. So if Richard will advise me, and if Hugh will write for me, I am sure of being somehow right. Oh, Millie, would you fetch the papers?
This pen has done some 20 years' service. It's still in perfect order. I took it by the makers, and they said there was no reason why it should ever wear out. Therefore, we are of the opinion that the times are ripe, etc., etc. The superfluous youth of our ever-increasing population, etc., etc. What we owe to the dead, etc., etc.
This will be a masterpiece. Could my own meaning sound like that?
I cannot promise that the editor will put it in, but I am meeting with somebody at luncheon.
Oh, my prime minister. Oh, what I would have done without both of you, I do not know.
We shall see you at our party tonight, Lady Bruton.
I may or may not come, but thank you so much for the invitation. Oh, you. Thank you.
Lady Bruton went majestically up to her room and lay on the sofa. She was drowsy and heavy.
Like a field of clover in the sunshine this hot June day with the bees going round.
And Hugh and Richard walked further and further from her, being attached to her by a thin thread which stretched and stretched as she walked across London.
As if one's friends were attached to one's body by a thin thread. Oh. Richard Dalloway and Hugh Whitbread hesitated at the corner of Conduit Street at the very moment that Millicent Bruton, lying on the sofa, let the thread snap.
Can you believe, Lady Bruton? Why, look at that Spanish necklace. I think Evelyn might like that.
So she might.
I'm going into the shop.
Right, you are. Goodness knows I don't want to go buying necklaces with you. But there are tides in the body. Morning meets afternoon. I don't care a straw what becomes of emigration. About that letter, whether the editor puts it in or not. Oh, let you give the necklace to a girl if you must buy jewels. Any girl in the street.
I should like to speak to Mr. Dubonnet. Mr. Dubonnet has the measurements of Evelyn's neck and knows her views upon Spanish jewelry and the extent of her possessions in that line, which I certainly cannot remember.
All of this seemed to Richard Dalloway awfully odd, for he never gave Clarissa presents except a bracelet 2 or 3 years ago, which had not been a success. She never wore it.
It pains me to remember that she never wore it.
And as a single spider's thread, after wavering here and there, attaches itself to the point of a leaf, so Richard's mind set now on his wife Clarissa, whom Peter Walsh had loved so passionately.
Really, after dealing here for 35 years, I am not going to be put off by a mere boy who does not know his business. I will not buy anything until Mr. Dubonnet chooses to be in.
I couldn't have said that to save my life.
Good day, Richard.
Good day, you.
Richard turned the corner of Conduit Street, eager, yes, very eager, to travel that spider's thread of attachment between himself and Clarissa.
I will go straight to her, but I want to come in holding something.
Flowers?
Yes! Flowers! Any number of flowers. Roses, orchids, to celebrate this feeling about her when we spoke of Peter Walsh at luncheon. We'd never spoken of it. Not for years had we spoken of it, which is the greatest mistake in the world. I will say it straight out in so many words. Whatever she might think of me, holding out my flowers, I will say, I love you.
Why not?
Really, it was a miracle. Thinking of the war and thousands of poor chaps with all their lives before them, shoveled together, already have forgotten. It was a miracle. Here I am, in the prime of life, walking to my house in Westminster to tell Clarissa that I love her. This is happiness.
Big Ben was beginning to strike. First the warning, musical, then the hour, irrevocable.
O'clock. Good heavens, 3 already. It's perfectly true that I had not asked Ellie Henderson to my party, but I'd done it on purpose. Now Mrs. Marsham writes that she told Ellie Henderson that she would ask me. Ellie so much wanted to come. But why should I invite all the dull women in London to my parties? And why should Mrs. Marsham interfere? Oh, and there's Elizabeth closeted all this time with Miss Kilman. Anything more nauseating I cannot conceive. Prayer at this hour with that woman. Oh, what a surprise! Oh.
But he could not bring himself to say he loved her. Not in so many words.
But how lovely!
She understood. She understood without my speaking. My Clarissa.
How lovely they look. Was lunch amusing? Oh, did Lady Bruton ask after me? Oh, Peter Walsh is back. Mrs. Marsham has written. Must I ask Ellie Henderson? Oh, and that woman Kilman is upstairs.
But let us sit down for 5 minutes. Why is everything empty? All the chairs are against the wall. What have you been doing?
They're for the party. Have you forgotten the party?
No, I've not forgotten the party. So, Peter Walsh is back.
Yes, he came here. He's in love with some woman in India. He hasn't changed in the slightest. There I was, mending my dress, thinking of Morton when he suddenly appeared.
Hugh was at lunch.
Oh, I met him today, too.
Well, he's getting absolutely intolerable. Buying Evelyn necklaces? An intolerable ass.
And while Peter was here, it came over me that I might have married him. Oh, just as he always was, you know.
Yes. We were talking about him at lunch.
But Richard could not tell her he loved her.
We wrote a letter to the Times for Millicent Bruton. That's about all Hugh is fit for. And our dear Miss Kilman.
Aren't these roses absolutely lovely? Miss Kilman arrived just as we'd done lunch. Elizabeth turned pink. They've shut themselves up. I suppose they're praying.
Lord, I don't like it. But these things pass over if you let them.
Miss Kilman arrived in a mackintosh with an umbrella.
He had not said I love you, but he held her hand. Happiness is this, he thought.
But why should I invite all the dull women in London to my parties? And if Mrs. Marsham gave a party, did I invite her guests?
Poor Ellie Henderson. My dear, if you worry about these parties this much, I cannot let
to give them. Did she wish she had married Peter?
I must be off.
Subcommittee?
Armenians. Or perhaps it's Albanians.
There is a dignity in people, a solitude, even between husband and wife, a gulf, and that one must respect.
An hour's complete rest after luncheon.
How like him. He'll go on saying an hour's complete rest after lunch till the end of time, because some doctor had ordered it once. It was like him to take what doctor said literally, part of his adorable simplicity. But why do I suddenly feel, for no reason, desperately unhappy? There's something Peter had said. What Richard said added to it, but what had he said? There were his roses. My parties, that was it. Both of them criticized me for my parties. They think, or Peter thinks at any rate, that I enjoy imposing myself. He thinks I like to have famous people about me. He thinks me simply a snob. Richard thinks it's foolish to like excitement when I know it's bad for my heart. He thinks it's childish. And both of them are quite wrong. What I like is simply life. That's what I do it for. My parties are an offering. You see, here's someone in South Kensington, and someone else, say, in Bayswater, and another in Mayfair. If only they could be brought together. So I do it. I give a party to combine, to create. And no one in the whole world will know how I love it.
Yes, I stood on the landing and I wore a Macintosh. But I had my reasons. First, it was cheap. Second, I'm over 40 and I don't dress to please. Moreover, I am poor. Otherwise, I wouldn't be taking jobs from people like the Dalloways, from rich people who liked to be kind. Mr. Dalloway, to do him justice, has been kind, but Clarissa Dalloway has not. She has been merely condescending. She comes from the most worthless of all classes, the rich. Mr. Dalloway has allowed me, and that was very generous of him, to teach his daughter history. Then our Lord came to me. I saw the light 2 years and 3 months ago. Now, I do not envy women like Clarissa Dalloway. I pity them. They should have been behind a counter. They should have been in a factory. Clarissa Dalloway and all the other fine ladies. The Lord has shown me the way. So now whenever these hot, painful feelings boil within me, this hatred of Clarissa Dalloway, for example, I think of God. Rage is succeeded by calm.
Oh, I forgot my gloves.
If only I could make her weep, bring her to her knees crying, "You are right."
This is a Christian, this woman, ugly, commonplace, without kindness or grace. She knows the meaning of life. You're taking Elizabeth to the stores.
I am.
We're going to the stores.
Goodbye. Remember the party. Remember our party tonight.
Dalloway insulted me. That I expected. But she has not triumphed. She has not mastered the flesh. Ugly. Clumsy. Clarissa Dalloway laughed at me for being that. I despise her from the bottom of my heart. Her life is a tissue of vanity and deceit. I cannot help being ugly. I cannot afford to buy pretty clothes. At any rate, I got Elizabeth. But one must have faith in God. Mr. Whittaker says that I'm here for a purpose. But no one knows the agony. Pointing to the crucifix, he said, God knows. But why must I suffer when other women like Clarissa Dalloway escape? Knowledge comes through suffering, Mr. Whittaker said. Well, we must have our tea. When people are happy, they have a reserve upon which to draw, whereas I am like a wheel without a tire, jolted by every pebble. Law, medicine, politics, every profession is open to women of your generation. But for myself, my career is absolutely ruined. Was it my fault?
Good gracious, no.
My grandfather kept an oil and color shop in Kensington. Oh, you must not go.
I really must.
I'm not quite finished yet.
Of course.
Are you going to the party tonight?
I suppose I'm going. Mother wants me to go.
You must not let parties absorb you.
I don't much like parties.
I never go to parties. People don't ask me to parties. Why should they ask me? I'm plain. I'm unhappy. I don't pity myself. I pity other people more. Don't quite forget me.
You pay at the desk.
Clarissa Dalloway has triumphed. Elizabeth is gone. Beauty is gone. Youth is gone.
It's so nice to be out of doors. I don't need to go home just yet. It's nice to be out in the air.
Suddenly, Elizabeth stepped forward and boarded the omnibus.
I took a seat on top.
The impetuous creature started forward, sprang away.
I hold the rail to steady myself.
For the omnibus was reckless, boldly snatching a passenger or ignoring a passenger.
Squeezing eel-like in between and rushing all sails spread up to Whitehall.
I'm free. The fresh air is so delicious.
Elizabeth looked like a figurehead on a ship.
And already it was beginning.
People were beginning to compare her to poplar trees, early dawn, hyacinths, fawns, running water, and garden lilies.
And it made her like a burden to her, for she so much preferred being left alone to do what she liked.
Every man fell in love with her.
For it was beginning.
And did Elizabeth give one thought to me, who loved her without jealousy, to whom she had always been a fawn in the open, a moon in a glade?
I'm free. The fresh air is so delicious. Every profession is open to the women of my generation, Miss Kilman says. So I might be a doctor. I might be a farmer. I might own 1,000 acres and have people under me. I would go and see them in their cottages. One might make a very good farmer. In short, I would like to have a profession. So I will become a doctor or a farmer. Or possibly go into Parliament. I must go and dress for the party.
The sound of waters in the room. Through the waves come the voices of birds singing.
Septimus, Dr. Holmes will be here at 5 o'clock. He is coming to take you to your new home to rest.
Fear no more, says the heart and the body. Fear no more. I'm not afraid.
I can't bear to see him smiling like that. This is not a marriage. He is not a husband to look strange like that, always starting, laughing, sitting hour after hour. Lately, he becomes excited suddenly for no reason, and both Dr. Holmes and Dr. Bradshaw say excitement is the worst thing for him. He waves his hands and cries out he knows the truth. He said he heard Evan singing behind a screen, but I heard nothing.
Holmes is onto us.
He invents stories about Holmes. Holmes eating porridge, Holmes reading Shakespeare. He makes himself roar with laughter, for Dr. Holmes seems to stand for something horrible to him.
Human nature.
And there are his visions. He's drowned, lying on a cliff with the gulls screaming over him. Or he's hearing music and the tears are running down his cheeks. That is the most dreadful thing of all, to see a man like Septimus crying. And he lies, listening until he cries out that he's falling down, down into the flames. I look for flames, it is so vivid. But there is nothing. We are alone in the room. Oh, it's a dream, Septimus.
What is the name of Mrs. Filmer's married daughter?
Mrs. Peters. I'm afraid this hat is too small. Mrs. Filmer brought me grapes this morning and I wanted to do something to say thank you.
What does, Mr. Peters do?
I think Mrs. Filmer said he traveled for some company.
It's too small for Mrs. Peters.
Of course it is, absurdly small, but that's the one she chose.
I'm Mrs. Peters, and this is my tiny hat. It's an organ grinder's monkey's hat.
There.
That's even more ridiculous. Now the poor woman will look like a pig at a fair. What have you got in your work box?
Ribbons, tassels, beads, flowers.
She shall have a beautiful hat. There. Now stitch it together. But be very, very careful to keep it just as I made it. When she sews, she makes a sound like a kettle, bubbling, murmuring, always busy. The sun might go in and out, but I will wait in this warm place, which one comes on at the edge of a wood sometimes in the evening, when the air buffets the cheek like the wing of a bird.
There. That'll do for the moment. Later on.
Her sentence bubbles away, drip, 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 like a contented tap left running. It's wonderful. Never have I done anything which made me feel so proud. It's so real, so substantial. Mrs. Peters' hat. Just look at it. Try it on.
Oh, but I must look so strange. Septimus, do you like the hat?
Bradshaw said that I must be taught to rest. He said we must be separated. Must. Why must? What power does Bradshaw have over me? What right has Bradshaw to say must to me?
Because you talked of killing yourself.
Holmes and Bradshaw are onto me. Oh, where are my papers? The things I've written.
Diagrams. Designs. Little men and women brandishing sticks for arms with wings on their backs. Circles traced round shillings. The sun and stars. Zigzagging precipices with mountaineers ascending, roped together exactly like knives and forks. Sea pieces with little faces laughing out of what might be waves. A map of the world. Burn them. Now for his writings. How the dead sing behind rhododendron bushes. Odes to time. Conversations with Shakespeare. Evans. His messages from the dead. The meaning of the world. Burn them!
But they are so beautiful. Septimus, even if they come and take you, I will go with you. They cannot separate us against our wills.
All your petals are open. You are a flowering tree. Miracle.
There. Nothing can get at them. No one can separate us, huh? Nothing can separate us.
My dear lady, I come as a friend.
No, I will not allow you to see
My
my
dear
outfit.
lady, you must allow me
No,
to see
no!
Holmes will get me. But no. Not Holmes. Not Bradshaw.
He considers Mrs. Filmer's bread knife, with the word bread carved in the handle.
But one mustn't spoil that. The gas fire.
It's too late now. Holmes is coming.
Razors.
Lucrezia packed them. There remains only the window. The rather melodramatic business of opening the window and throwing himself out.
Holmes and Bradshaw like that sort of thing.
But wait till the very last moment.
I do not want to die. Life is good. The sun hot. Only human beings. What do they want?
My dear lady, I come as a friend.
No, we will not allow you to see my outfit.
I'll give it to you.
No! Look out!
Good God, coward!
No! 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 No!
You must be brave and drink this.
What is it?
Something sweet. Your husband is horribly mangled. He will not regain consciousness. You must not see him. You must be spared some part of this. There will be an inquest, I'm afraid.
They won't bring the body in here, will they?
No, I don't think so. It was a sudden impulse. No one is to blame. Why the devil he did it, I cannot say.
It seemed to her she drank the sweet stuff that she was stepping through long windows, out into some garden. But where? The clock went on striking 4, 5, 6, and Mrs. Filmer's waving apron seemed part of that garden.
I once saw a flag rippling on a mast when I was with my aunt in Venice.
Men killed in battle were thus saluted, and Septimus had been through the war. Of her memories, most were happy. She put on her hat and ran through cornfields somewhere near the sea. They sat on a cliff. Strewn she felt, like flying flowers over some tomb.
He is dead. Oh, they will not bring him in here, will they?
No, no, no. They're carrying him away now.
Let her sleep. It is one of the triumphs of civilization. An ambulance, speeding to the hospital, having picked up some poor devil. That is civilization. The efficiency, the organization, the communal spirit of London. Every cart or carriage is drawing aside to let the ambulance pass. Busy men thinking how easily it might have been them there, stretched on a shelf with a doctor or a nurse. I remember Clarissa once going on top of an omnibus with me somewhere, spotting odd little scenes from the top of a bus. Clarissa had a theory in those days. We had heaps of theories, as young people have. Her theory was to explain the feeling we have of not knowing people, not being known. It was unsatisfactory, we agreed, how little one knew people. But she said she felt herself everywhere, so that to know anyone, one must seek out the people who completed them. Odd affinities she had with people she'd never even spoken to. Some woman in the street, some man behind a counter, even trees or barns. It ended in a transcendental theory which allowed her to believe that since our apparitions, the part of us which appears, are so momentary compared with the unseen part of us, which spreads wide, the unseen might survive attached to another person, or even haunting certain places after death. Perhaps. Perhaps. But I don't mean to die yet. I will go to Clarissa's party.
The Prime Minister is coming. I heard them say so in the dining room.
Does it matter? Does it matter in the least? One Prime Minister, more or less.
Miss Elizabeth looked so lovely. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She's wearing the necklace Mr. Dalloway gave her.
Sir John Needham.
How delightful to see you.
Miss Henderson.
So good of you to come.
Lord Lexham.
How delightful to see you.
I'm so sorry my wife couldn't come.
Mr. Walsh.
How delightful to see you.
She said it to everyone. How delightful to see you. She was at her worst. Effusive, insincere. It was a great mistake to have come. I should have stayed at home and read my book.
Oh dear, it's going to be a failure. A complete failure.
I'm so sorry my wife couldn't come. She caught a cold at the Buckingham Palace garden party.
I can see Peter criticizing me there in that corner. It's extraordinary how Peter can put me into these states simply by coming and standing in a corner. It's idiotic.
She would not wear her furs. You know, my dear, how you women are.
Makes me feel quite sick to know that it's all falling flat. Any explosion would be better than people wandering aimlessly or standing in a bunch in a corner like Ellie Henderson.
I'm subject to chills, but it shouldn't matter that I come down sneezing tomorrow. It's the girls with their naked shoulders. I don't feel qualified to meet well-dressed people who do this sort of thing every night of the season, merely telling their maids, I'll wear so-and-so. The invitation to Clarissa's party had come at the last minute. I sort of had a feeling she had not meant to invite me this year. Why should she? There's no reason, really, except that we've always known each other. Indeed, we're cousins. But naturally, we'd grown apart, Clarissa being so sought after. Elizabeth all grown up? She couldn't be more than 17. Oh, she is very, very handsome. I must remember everything to tell Edith. Girls wear straight frocks, perfectly tight with the skirts well above the ankles. It is not becoming.
Well, Ellie! And how is the world treating you?
Some people really feel the heat more than the cold.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Hello, Richard.
Good Lord! It's old Peter! Old Peter Walsh! I'm delighted to see you. Ever so pleased to see you. You haven't changed a bit.
It seems as though they haven't seen each other for a long time. I'm sure I recognize that man's face. Edith will be sure to know.
So it isn't a failure after all. It's going to be all right now. My party. It's begun. It's started. Oh, but it's still touch and go.
Lady Bruton.
How delightful to see you.
Hugh Whitbread.
I feel like a stake driven in at the top of the stairs. So good of you to come.
Professor Brierly.
Every time I give a party, I have a feeling of being something other than myself. So lovely.
Miss Nancy Blow.
That everyone is somehow someone else and much more another.
Miss Sally Rossiter.
Clarissa.
That voice. Sally Seaton, after all these years.
I was passing through London and heard from Clara Hayden, so I thrust myself in without an invitation. I have 5 enormous boys.
I can't believe it.
It's the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister? Oh, excuse me, Sally.
Is it really the Prime Minister? Oh, what a thing to tell Edith!
It was perfectly plain they all knew, felt to the marrow of their bones this majesty passing, this symbol of what they all stood for, English society. Lord, Lord, the snobbery of the English. There, that must be, by Jove it is, Hugh Whitbread, snuffing round the precincts of the great. And now, Clarissa escorts her Prime Minister down the room. Prancing, sparkling, she's wearing a mermaid's dress, lullabing on the waves with the most perfect air of a creature floating in its element. Age has brushed her, but she has about her an exquisite cordiality, as if she wished the whole world well. But I am not in love with her.
The Prime Minister was good to come. Sally's here. Peter's here. And Richard is very pleased. I feel the intoxication of the moment. Oh dear, I must go. There's Professor Brierly with little Jim Hutton. Even at this distance, I can see that they're quarreling. I do love Bach, don't you?
Oh, I do too! Mrs. Dalloway, you are by far one of the best of the great ladies, taking an interest in art, and so charming!
I have half a mind to snatch you off and set you down on the piano. You play so divinely. Oh, but the noise.
A sign of a successful party.
She knows everything in the whole world about them.
Does she indeed?
Oh, excuse me, I must speak to Nancy Blow. It is angelic. It is delicious of you to have come. I had meant to have dancing.
For the young people, since they cannot talk.
And why should they?
They shout, embrace, swing, they're up at dawn, and then, all tingling, they plunge into the lake and swim. But the enormous resources of the English language are not for them.
Alas, I must leave you, Lord Yates and Miss Blow. Where has Peter got to? Oh, there you are. Come, talk to Aunt Helena about Burma.
I've not had a word with you all
Oh,
evening.
we will talk later. Peter Walsh. He's been to Burma.
Ah! Well, I cannot resist recalling what Charles Darwin said about my little book on the orchids of Burma.
Excuse me, I must speak to Lady Bruton.
No doubt it's been forgotten, my book on the orchids of Burma, but it went into 3 publications
before 1870.
3 publications.
I remember you. You were at Borden.
Yes, I was.
Richard so enjoyed his lunch party.
Oh, Richard was the greatest possible help. He helped me to write a letter. And how are you?
Oh, perfectly well.
I can never think of anything to say to Clarissa. Though I like her, we have nothing in common. It might have been better if Richard had married a woman with less charm, who would have helped him more in his work. Oh, there's Peter Walsh. He's a very able fellow who should have made a name for himself, but didn't. Always in difficulties with women. Oh, Peter Walsh, you must come to lunch.
That would be lovely, Lady Bruton.
Oh, but excuse me, you were talking about India.
Yes, and my book on the orchids of Burma.
I remember nothing whatsoever about the flora or fauna of India. I've been there, of course. I've stayed with 3 viceroys. I must get your opinion, Peter, being fresh from India. I must get Sir Sampson to meet you, for really, it prevents me from sleeping at night. The folly of it, the wickedness, I might say, being a soldier's daughter. Oh, but I'm an old woman now, not good for much.
No, I wouldn't
But
say.
my house, my servants, my good friend Millie Brush, do you remember her? Were all there, only asking to be used, if they could be of help. For I never speak of England, but this Isle of Men, this dear, dear land, is in my blood.
And if ever a woman could have worn the helmet and shot the arrow, could have led troops to attack, ruled with indomitable justice barbarian hordes, that woman is Lady Millicent Bruton.
Clarissa! Oh, I shall come later. Wait until all these people have gone. I shall come back. There are the Bradshaws.
We are shockingly late, dear Mrs. Dalloway. We hardly dare come in.
Yes, we couldn't resist the temptation.
So, how is your son at Eton?
Oh, he just missed his 11 because of the mumps. I think his father minded even more than he did, being nothing but a great boy himself.
He and Richard are talking about some case.
Yes, it's about the deferred effects of shell shock. Our poor husband's talking about work again.
Yes, they're always working.
Just as we were setting out for the party, my husband was called up on the telephone. A very sad case. A young man had killed himself. He had been in the army.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Always, my body goes through it first when I'm told suddenly of an accident. My dress flames, my body burns. They say he threw himself from a window. The ground flashed up, the rusty spikes went through him, and there he lay with a thud, and then a suffocation of blackness. Or so I see it. But why did he do it? I once threw a shilling into the Serpentine, but never anything more. But this young man had flung it all away. We go on living, we will grow old. But this young man who killed himself, had he plunged holding his treasure? If it were now to die, 'twere now to be most happy. Suppose he had that passion, and had gone to Sir William Bradshaw, a great doctor, and Sir William impressed him with his evil powers. Might he not have then said, life is made intolerable by men like that? There is in the depths of my heart an awful fear. Even now, quite often, if Richard were not there reading the Times, I would perish. But that young man killed himself. Somehow it's my disaster. It's my disgrace. It's my punishment. To watch as a man disappears in profound darkness and I am forced to stand here in my evening dress. It is due to Richard that I've never been so happy. No pleasure can equal the straightening of the chairs, the pushing one book on the shelf. I'm done with the triumphs of youth. I've lost myself in the process of living, to find it with a shock of delight as the sun rises the day sinks. Many a time at Borton, when they were all talking, I went to look at the sky. It holds something of my own in it. This country sky, the sky above Westminster. The leaden circles dissolve in the air. Fear no more. That young man killed himself, but I do not pity him. I feel somehow very like him. I feel glad he did it, threw it away. He makes me feel the beauty of life. I must go back to my party. I must find Sally and Peter.
Sally.
Peter!
But where's Clarissa? Where's the woman gone to?
Oh, undoubtedly there are people of importance. Politicians whom neither of us knows, whom Clarissa has to be nice to.
Undoubtedly.
She's with them. Yet, why is Richard Dalloway not in the cabinet? I suppose he hasn't been a success. I scarcely ever read the papers, but I sometimes see his name mentioned. But while I live a very solitary life, in the wilds, Clarissa would say, among great merchants, great manufacturers who did things. I've done things too. I have 5 sons.
Lord! Lord! The last time we met, we were among the cauliflowers in the moonlight.
I picked a rose.
Yes, you marched me up and down that awful night after the scene by the fountain. I caught the midnight train. Heavens, I wept.
You were in love with Clarissa. Then there was that dreadful, ridiculous scene over Richard Dalloway at lunch.
You called him Wickham.
Why not call Richard Wickham? Oh, but Clarissa flared up. And indeed, we've never seen each other since. Not more than half a dozen times over the last 10 years. And you went off to India.
Yes, I did.
I heard vaguely that you had made an unhappy marriage.
Yes, I did.
Do you remember that little Emily Bronte book you gave me? I still have it. In those days you were going to write. Have you written?
Not a word. But who is this Rossiter you married?
Oh.
I understand he wore 2 camellias on his wedding day. That's all I know of him. Clarissa wrote you have myriads of servants, miles of conservatory, something like that.
Yes! I have 10,000 a year! Can you believe it? Now, whether that was before the tax was paid or after, I can't remember, for my husband, you must meet whom you would like, does all that for me.
You used to be in rags and tatters. You pawned your grandmother's ring to come to Borton.
Oh, yes! A ruby ring, which Marie Antoinette gave to my great-grandfather. Oh, I never had a penny to my name in those days. But going to Borton meant so much to me. It kept me sane. But that's all a thing of the past. It's all over now. And Mr. Perry is dead. And Miss Perry is still alive.
Never had I had such a shock in my life. I was quite certain she was dead.
And Clarissa's marriage has been a success, I suppose. And that very handsome, very self-possessed young woman is their daughter, Elizabeth?
She's not a bit like Clarissa.
Oh, Clarissa. I owe Clarissa an enormous amount. We were friends, not acquaintances, real friends. I still see Clarissa all in white going about the house with her hands full of flowers. But she lacked something, what is it? She had charm, she had extraordinary charm. But to be frank, and I do feel you are an old friend, Peter, a real friend. To be quite frank then, how could Clarissa have done it? Married Richard Dalloway, a sportsman, a man who cared only for dogs. Literally, when he came into the room, he smelt of the stables, and then all this. Hugh Whitbread. Oh, the admirable Hugh. Does he have children?
Oh, everybody in the room has 6 sons at Eton except me. Thank God I have none. No sons, no daughters, no wife.
You must come and stay with us for weeks and weeks.
I will come. I would love to stay with you.
All these years, the Dalloways have never been once. Time after time we've asked them. Clarissa will not come. Clarissa is at heart a snob. One has to admit it, a snob. Clarissa thinks I'm married beneath me, my husband being a miner's son. Every penny we have, he earned.
A snob, is she? Yes, in many ways.
Yet, sometimes at night or on Christmas Day when I count my blessings, I put our friendship first. We were so young. Clarissa was pure-hearted. Oh, you'll think me sentimental. So I am. For I've come to feel it is the only thing worth saying. What one feels. Cleverness is silly. One must simply say what one feels.
I don't know what I feel.
Poor Peter. Why doesn't Clarissa come and talk to us? That's what you're longing for.
My relations with Clarissa have not been simple. It's spoiled my life, really. One can't be in love twice.
Still, it is better to have loved.
That is all very true, all very true.
You must come and stay with us in Manchester.
I will come and stay with you as soon as I've done what I have to do in London.
And Clarissa cared more for you than she ever cared for Richard. I'm positive of that.
No, you go too far, Sally. That good fellow. There he is at the end of the room holding forth. The same as ever. Dear old Richard.
Do you think they're really happy together? I know nothing about them. People are so difficult. I often go into my garden and get from my flowers a piece which men and women never give me.
I do not care for cabbages. I prefer human beings.
Oh, indeed, the young are beautiful.
When one is young, one is too excited to know people. Now that one is old,
In my heart, I am a girl of 20.
now that one is mature, then one can watch, one can understand. One does not lose the power of feeling.
No, that is true. I feel more deeply, more passionately every year.
It increases in my experience. There is someone in India. I would like to tell you about her. I would like you to know her. She's married. She has 2 small children.
You must all come to Manchester. You must promise before we leave.
I will come.
Richard has improved. You are right. I shall go and talk to him. I shall say good night. What does the brain matter compared with the heart?
There's Elizabeth. She feels not half what we feel, not yet.
I looked at you from across the room and thought, who is that lovely girl? And I realized that that was my daughter.
What is this terror? What is this ecstasy? What is it that fills me with extraordinary excitement? It is Clarissa. There she is.